Before I introduce our next guest, it's important to warn that some of the things we are discussing on today's show could be triggering. If you need support, the crisis line on our screen right now is available for you 24 hours a day. Let's meet Elaine Kiknosway, a proud practitioner of Indigenous tradition who wears many hats. She is an appointed minister, a doula, an advocate, a dancer, singer, drummer, a trauma counselor, of course, Mama to Theland, who we spoke to earlier in the show. And she's here now to share her story, her hopes and her dreams for herself and her community. A very big welcome to you, Elaine. Thank you so much for joining us today. I want to hold some space for you to do a land acknowledgement.
Bonjour, Ani Tansi Quickly Wache Sego, Elaine Dijnakans, Mangandorum, Pelicaneros and Donjaba, Algonquin, Aki, and Donji. So I live here on Algonquin territory, but there's many territories that we live as treaty people. We're all treaty people, so we should all be taking the time, the effort, the space to acknowledge the land we live on, the languages, the songs, and the protocols, and also understand our treaty responsibility to know that it's as long as the grass grows and the rivers flow, we will always be in peace and friendship together. So miigwech hai hai.
Welcome. Welcome, Elaine.
Thank you.
Tell us a bit about your story and your experience as a 60s Scoop survivor.
Well, I mean, I was born at a time that institutions and oppression, government oppression for Indigenous peoples, it was the norm to be not raised in the community. Because I was born in the time that residential schools were happening, TB sanatoriums, Indian hospitals, relocation, and disconnect. So I was apprehended at the height of the 60s Scoop in 1969. So I was about 2.5, almost 3. And I was raised in several foster homes that weren't homes. And then I was adopted into a non-Indigenous family.
That experience, I can imagine, really separated you from your culture. Can you give us a sense of what that was like?
A lot of times when you've been disconnected from your land, your language, your kin, your community, you're always wondering, you know, where do I belong? Who claims me? You sometimes seek out places that help you belong. Or if there's nervousness or anxiousness or trauma, intergenerational trauma, that sometimes it can lead you down a path that is not great. And so the path that I chose back then was kind of running and a little bit, well, actually quite a few years of addiction. But then there's that rebirth, regrowth, relearn, realignment as you get older. I'm a sibling of 13. When I reunited with my mom, my bio mom, I'm a proud older sister. I'm a proud auntie. I'm a proud grandmother, great or step grandmother. I'm a mother of one, and all these different roles that I take very seriously of how to make sure it's authentic and not repurposing, realigning, or redoing the harm, you know, because the harm generation to generation, you know, that has been in our communities for so long, we don't have to have it interlope into our next generation. So I'm always trying to ensure that there's talk about feelings, connection, ceremony, song, dance. There's always survivor guilt. There's survivor guilt too. You know, like, how come my life is this way when, you know, I could easily go back to that path of addictions again. I've been sober now and on this path of what they say, navigating a better road for almost 24 years, 25 years sober.
I'm wondering if a lot of what you've told me has to do with your decision to become a trauma counselor. Like, when did that happen and why did that happen?
Well, I've worked at the same agency, Minwashin Lodge Aboriginal Women's Support Center, that changed to Indigenous Women's Support Center. Uh, and they were the first in my 20s that were talking about violence is not tradition, changing the cycle. How do we open the conversation? How do we prevent the conversation? How do we talk to Children's Aid Society to ensure that our children stay connected and our youth stay connected and our adults and our old people, and really talk about what is an elder, cultural safety. We always have this conversation about how we intuitively talk about the walking wounded, constantly talk about survivor, led by survivors, guided by survivors, and being raised, in so many environments, like on reserve, off reserve, settlement, realigning, not knowing where we belong, who claims us. So there's always that conversation, but we also have to go to the conversation where, only like 1996 was when the last residential school closed, but CAS is still involved, or Children's Aid Society is still involved with many of our families or communities, missing and murdered, suicide. It's compounded grief.
Mm-hmm.
It's constant compounded grief on top of the intergenerational grief, or the interloper that keeps being passed through. So it's not just brand new. And sometimes people are hearing about it going, I don't know how you survived. And people are like, we just do. We do.
Can you tell me, Elaine, like, I'm really interested to see that the areas where you're helping Indigenous people heal, like, what are you focused on with your practice?
A lot of times it's survivor-led. It's really important that survivors have the, those places of control. It's really important to not go into places where people aren't ready, because that re-victimizes or re-traumatizes. So, and there's this big blanket of shame, there's this big blanket of trauma, big blanket of violence that is still, like, loud noises can trigger a person, a smell, a sight, even seasons. Like right now, we have to remind ourselves during this fall season or at the end of the summer season can be really triggering, because those were the times where children were taken. It's good that the people are talking about the ones that passed away, but also knowing the incredible grief that we've carried as community and family and kin. We always knew. And I always, wonder, like, for child welfare, like, where are we all buried? Because they changed our names sometimes. How do we bring us all home? There's an advocacy for that, like, because there's no national reconnection or relocation. Like, there's a huge relocation plan, but there's no reconnecting plan.
This is why the trauma counselors of the community and the elders of the community are playing such a huge role right now, because that disconnection is the thing that creates the legacy that we're speaking of. Listen, I really want to thank you for the time that you've spent with us, Elaine, and for raising such a warrior in your son. Continue to do your good work. And thank you for sharing with us. I know it's never easy to speak about, but we appreciate all your knowledge.
Thank you, Kiknosway. Thank you for asking and sharing that.
Thank you, Elaine.